Welcome back to Your Hero's Quest. So you might be asking, what is Glastonbury, where is that, and why should I be interested in it? Well, we're going to get into the magic, mystery, history, legend, and myth of this incredibly sacred place that will fascinate you, I promise. So Glastonbury is in Somerset, England. It's been inhabited since the Neolithic Age, the Bronze Age, the Romans, the Druids, the pagans, into the Christian times, and up until now, it has always been super sacred and important. There are so many legends associated with this place, and it's known as being remnants of Atlantis, that these Roman roads that were built there were simply dusted off by the Romans and are actually far more ancient and left over from this lost civilization. It's also known as the Isle of Avalon. It is known as the gateway to the other world, that fairy realm that we talked about in my last episode. And there is some corroboration of this because it was originally a few different islands. It used to be flooded with water. That's where it became this Isle of Avalon, and Avalon means apples, so the Isle of Apples. There are tons of apple trees here, and it's known as it's a cider region of England, so they've been making hard cider here for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And apples are also, of course, the fruit of the gods in Norse mythology and Greek mythology. And of course, there's our modern saying of an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So all this magic is linked to this place in this overarching way. Of course, Avalon is known as King Arthur's final resting place. After the Battle of Camlan, he was taken to Avalon to heal his wounds. And it is said that there he sleeps, resting, waiting for England to call upon him again. I think the time might be now. Arthur, where are you at? In his book, View Over Atlantis, John Michell, in the 60s, I believe, claims that Britain has this sacred landscape and that these 7 islands were held in great reverence. They were sacred to Druids in pre-Christian times and inhabited by hermit sages. These 7 islands also mirror the constellation of the Great Bear. And King Arthur is associated with the bear because art equals bear. So there's another link to the Arthurian legends in this place. And we're going to see many more as we continue. So the intermingling of Druidism, paganism, magic, myth, and Christianity all intersects here as well. Joseph of Arimathea is said to have brought Jesus here, where he studied with these ancient Druids. Of course, this couldn't have been included in the Bible. And there actually, I didn't even know this, are 15 or so years missing from Jesus's life from year 12 to 33 that no one knows what he was up to. So, right, it's said that Joseph was traveling around with him and he's learning all these like pagan and ancient mysteries and practices. So he comes to Glastonbury with his uncle. And it's said that Joseph put his staff in the ground and out of it sprang a holy thorn tree, which still exists today. Well, actually, the original tree was cut down during the Reformation, but the monks preserved some of its clippings and they replanted kind of its seedlings around Glastonbury. The interesting thing that kind of makes this more historical than legend is that this tree is not indigenous to England. It is actually indigenous to the Middle East. So how else did it get there? After Jesus is crucified, legend has it that Joseph of Arimathea comes back and he brings with him the Holy Grail. So there is so much legend surrounding this that this Holy Grail is buried somewhere in Glastonbury. There is actually a hill called Chalice Hill that many believe is where it's buried under. He then erects the first Christian church in England on the site that is now Glastonbury Abbey. So one of the most sacred places in Glastonbury that everyone goes to is the Tor. Tor means hill or rocky peak. And on top of this Tor is St. Michael's Church. Unfortunately, what is only left of it is a tower. And the Tor actually has this interesting terracing on the side of it that no one really knows how it got there. Many believe that the Druids built it in as a sort of labyrinth to their initiates. Others say that a dragon lies sleeping in the Tor, but that is definitely still up for debate. Next to the Tor is Chalice Hill. And the interesting thing about Glastonbury that is found all around this sacred site that we're going to delve deeper into is the embodiment in the land and these structures of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. The Tor, being more rugged and sort of square-like, is the masculine, standing next to Chalice Hill, which is this perfectly beautiful domed round hill that is the feminine. And in between these two hills, they meet in this divine sacred union. There are also two springs that come out of each of these hills, the Chalice Well and the White Spring out of the Tor. And these also meet up at this place in this beautiful garden that where all these yew trees and oak trees are planted, have been planted for thousands of years, sort of guarding this sacred union. To have an earthly paradise and to reclaim paradise on earth, we must have this sacred marriage of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. This is both outer and internally. Obviously, we all have these energies within us, and it is when we can marry them in balance and in harmony within us and in our relationships with our partners that the paradise on earth comes back. Also, the Holy Grail is a feminine symbol, the Grail being this chalice, this cup of creation. Another symbol that is found around Glastonbury is the Vesica Pisces. And this is two circles that overlap and in the middle form what's called the mandorla. And this is the sacred geometry that underlies many sacred numbers and also all of creation. Getting into the mathematics of it, I am not the best mathematician, but I do know that this is how pi was derived and the golden ratio. The ancient Egyptians used the Vesica Pisces in the building of their pyramid with the Sphinx. It all lines up to it. Many churches, you can overlay the Pisces on it, the Vesica Pisces, and you'll see how these structures used this as well. The mandorla that's formed in the middle is the symbol of feminine creation. It's like the ultimate divine feminine symbol. And this mandorla is seen all over cathedrals and churches behind saints because they were considered to be holy. And it's the symbol of this holy passage, this holy vessel through which life is born. So in 1919, a keeper of Chalice Well donated this beautiful lid that covers the opening of the well, and it's the Vesica Pisces because it's that divine feminine symbol. Interestingly, the water from the Chalice Well is very iron rich, so the water turns everything around it red, which is also linked to the feminine, the iron, the blood, the flow. And these springs are incredibly healing. There have been so many stories of people healing all sorts of ailments from drinking this sacred water. In 1582, Dr. John Dee, who was Queen Elizabeth I's astrologer, he was also just absolutely brilliant, claims that he found the elixir of life at the Chalice Well. Okay, so back to the Tor. On top of the Tor is this St. Michael's Church. There was an original structure there that dates back to Roman times. Then there was another one built that was maybe from the 10th century. That one was destroyed in an earthquake in the 1200s. The current structure was built in the 14th century. It was a monastic building, unfortunately, mostly destroyed by the dissolution of the monasteries, and that's why the only thing left is this tower. But it still is this majestic beacon on top of the Tor that you can hike up to today. So I mentioned that Glastonbury is known to hold the gates to the fairy realm. And this is on somewhere on the slopes of the Tor. No one knows exactly where, but that is what legend says. And there is a legend about a saint called Saint Coughlin who lived in the 7th century, and he became the abbot of Glastonbury. He overhears two guys talking about Gwyn ap Nudd, who is known as the king of the fairy realm, the king of Annwn. And he gets upset because he's a Christian monk, and he says, "Don't talk about such devils." And these two guys say, well, you shouldn't talk ill of Gwyn ap Nudd. He won't like it, and he'll come for you. And the monk says, whatever, and goes back into his little living quarters. Not too long after, he gets a knock on the door. And he opens it, and it's this very well dressed and noble looking messenger saying that Gwyn ap Nudd would like a meeting with St. Coughlin. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm good, and shuts the door in his face. So the messenger comes the next day at the same time. And he finally comes a third time and says, it's kind of not a choice. You need to come, otherwise bad things will happen. So out of fear, St. Coughlin's like, okay, fine. But he packs a flask of holy water and he goes up to the top of the Tor where this meeting was meant to take place. And as he's approaching it and the mist kind of, dissolves, he sees this glorious castle with this beautiful court of gorgeous maidens and handsome knights, and everyone's dressed in red and blue. And there's beautiful white horses, and there's minstrels making gorgeous music, and he's invited into the castle. So he enters the castle and sees Gwyn ap Nudd sitting in this golden throne, and Gwyn invites him to this elaborate feast laid out. Gwyn ap Nudd offers him anything he wants, kind of like the fairy maidens from the Wells in my last episode. Any food, any drink, any luxury, or any respect that he desires, he can have in this fairy castle. And the monk knows better. If you eat in fairy, you may be stuck there forever. So the monk says, yeah, I'm good, and throws the holy water in Gwyn ap Nudd's face. And just like that, the accord is broken again because he was a rude guest, of course. And the castle and the court and everything immediately vanishes, and he's just left on top of the Tor with just the green landscape that he's used to. So we don't know what happened to the fairy king. I am sure that he just they went back into the Tor and into their other world. It was just sort of another show of Christianity rejecting this paganism and magic that is so linked to the land. So yeah, very interesting. Of course, the other main structure in Glastonbury that you must see is Glastonbury Abbey. And like I said, Joseph of Arimathea was said to have built this, the first church of England, but it also used to be a Druid university. So this has long been a place of religious and spiritual gathering and instruction. So the abbey itself was built in the 8th century. In the 1100s, it was largely destroyed by a huge fire, but quickly rebuilt. And during the reconstruction, they built a lady chapel devoted to Mary. Which Mary, we're not sure. Glastonbury Abbey grows greatly in wealth, renown. They house a ton of relics, a ton of manuscripts. It's one of the largest abbeys in England, and pilgrims have made pilgrimages there now for centuries. Unfortunately, from 1539 to 41, Henry VIII carries out the dissolution of the monasteries, and in only 2 years, over 900 religious buildings are completely dismantled, and he takes their relics and their wealth for the crown. Many of these gorgeous, influential historical buildings are completely destroyed. So Glastonbury Abbey that we see today is only the ruins of what it once was, but it just looks like it must have been the most gorgeous and imposing and beautiful place. And the last abbot of Glastonbury is executed on the top of the Tor, and that is the end of the abbey, unfortunately. Another story that links the abbey to King Arthur is that in 1191, some monks dug up these 2 oak coffins and found an inscription that said, "Here lies buried the renowned King Arthur with Guinevere in the Isle of Avalon." Later on, King Edward I and his wife Queen Eleanor come to rebury the bones in this gorgeous black marble coffin. Unfortunately, during the dissolution, that coffin, we have no idea what happened to it. So unsure whether this was actually King Arthur and Guinevere or if the monks made it up. We'll never know. And then in 1919, Frederick Bligh-Bond published a book about his excavations at the monastery where he was like the head of excavations at the time. And he is said to have used a medium to converse with these dead monks from the spirit realm who told him where certain sites were in Glastonbury. And they turned out to be true, but he got dismissed from his post because using a medium was very unchristian. So that's just another like fun little tale that adds to the intrigue of this place. So I'm sure you've heard of ley lines before. If not, they're these energetic, basically like grid lines that cover, and they're not necessarily in straight lines and grid pattern, but that's kind of how you can envision it, that cover the globe. They're also known as dragon lines, and they're just these vortexes basically. And when they meet up, it creates this really strong energy point. So running through the south of England is the Michael and Mary lines. And on the Michael line are all these sacred sites devoted to St. Michael. And on the Mary line are all these churches and sites devoted to St. Mary. And whether that's Mother Mary or Mary Magdalene, we don't really know because they had the same name. But I definitely think many of them were for Mary Magdalene because her whole history has been maybe the most suppressed of any woman over all time. Where these lines intersect, they intersect 3 times in Glastonbury, under the Chalice Well, under Glastonbury Abbey, and under the Tor. So at these points are this amazing energy and the intertwining energy of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. That is why this idea of an earthly paradise, Avalon, the fairy realm, the sacred marriage is so alive in the land in Glastonbury. There are these places that remind us of the truth. Glastonbury is also part of the greater global rainbow serpent, and this connects many sacred sites in other places are like the Great Pyramids, the Great Pyramid and Lake Titicaca, and it's the chakras of the world. So Glastonbury is the heart chakra of the world. Avalon is the heart chakra. The Holy Grail is the heart chakra. So it is not only in this sacred marriage, it's in that sacred union that our hearts expand, that our hearts open, and that spiritual fire within us is open. Our hearts is where that is contained, right? It's where our entire spiritual center is. So a place like Glastonbury is like a gift. In the mid 1700s, this guy who was living in Glastonbury claimed to have been healed by not one of the wells that we have been talking about. It was called the Chain Spring, I think, that also exists somewhere in Glastonbury. And it got published in a newspaper, and all these people started flocking to Glastonbury for this healing property of this spring. Thousands upon thousands, and then it was like 20,000 people, and this is a very small town. So it did get super overwhelmed. So the town closed up the spring, put a cover on it so no one could access it anymore, and ended up bottling the spring water and selling it to rich people in London. So I thought this was very much synonymous with the Rich Company from the last episode and the fairy maidens who served any traveler who came their way. These springs, these wells are for anyone on this earth to experience their healing. One last fascinating thing about Glastonbury that gives it an even more cosmic link than it already has is that in the 1920s, a woman named Catherine Maltwood loved the Arthurian legends, and her studies brought her to Glastonbury, where she was looking at the landscape on a map and noticed the outline of a lion and wrote a book about the Glastonbury zodiac. And it's called Temple of the Stars. So in an aerial view, through land masses and structures and rivers and all of that, form all the symbols of the Wheel of the Zodiac. She believed this zodiac represented a heavenly sanctuary on earth as well as the round table of the knights. And Glastonbury sits in the sign of Aquarius, in an eagle, which I thought was really fascinating because we are, of course, entering the age of Aquarius. And as Glastonbury being the heart chakra and this place of divine sacred union, That is where we're headed in this new age. So as above, so below. Glastonbury being the heart chakra of the world and maybe linked to the stars through the zodiac reminds us as well that everything is a small part of this greater whole, and so are we. So we have the ability to impact in such a great way. And really, all of this makes Glastonbury such an interesting and mystical place. And I don't know about you, but I certainly cannot wait to visit and experience all of that energy and magic for myself. And last but not least, we have our card pull from the Hero's Journey Dream Oracle for a final message to assist you on your quest today. So what will the cards tell us? We got X marks the spot, see the love in disguise. Your unpleasant dreams as well as challenging life experiences show you precisely where to shine a light to become a more awake, powerful version of yourself. These dreams show you where you're out of balance or letting your ego get the best of you. Even though it is counterintuitive, turn towards the things that grab you by the collar because they are trying to give you an important message. Turn your nightmares into rightmares by asking how they are trying to help you. Exaggerate this version until you feel a shift in perspective. Doing this makes you wiser, more compassionate, and resourceful than before. You can greet the unpleasant aspects of life at the door laughing, for you know they come bearing gifts. And the mantra is, shining a light on the part of my heart that loves my exes makes me magnetic to more love from the one I'm with, namely me. So I hope you enjoyed this little virtual travel to this amazing place. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you found any of these legends to seem like they have any merit, if you were intrigued, if you want to go there, I'd love to hear it. So like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next episode. Much love.